Let's talk about masculinity, because boy oh boy does that seem to be a popular topic nowadays. Here's my take on martial arts, because if you've tried therapy, you realize that just talking about your problems doesn't necessarily always do something. So you go to the internet, you look to what real men are saying. I'm sure if you've been surfing on the internet spheres along the manosphere and the men's rights sphere and the mental health sphere and the self-help sphere and all the spheres that are on this internet and social media talking about masculinity and traditional health and living, you've probably come across the notion that martial arts is somehow good for men. Let me tell you a funny story. One of my dad's friends, we were drinking beer the other week, watching some boxing on the TV. I told him I trained boxing. So just to establish my background, I've trained boxing, Muay Thai, and MMA. Those are my experiences. And then he told me about karate, because he had done some karate. He was almost a black belt in karate before the war. So with karate, you really only learn the attack principles at the end when you're a black belt. All the other levels up until you're majority, like 70% focused on defense. Because the point of karate is not to become a war combat soldier who beats the shit out of people. The point of karate is self-defense and escape, kind of. Despite this, he finished his little seminar on the principles of karate with explaining that the guy who was his teacher, who was training him to become a black belt, ended up becoming a serial killer. At that point, two loud, resounding Balkan laughs filled the room in a what the fuck kind of scenario. And then I watched some videos on MMA and martial arts. There was one called The Dark Mentality Required. I realized pretty much what a complete douchebag you have to be. And if you weren't one before, you can really train yourself to become one.
Many people like to pretend that martial arts masters embody discipline, respect, and humility, and the fights are won by being more focused and controlled than your opponent. This is a load of nonsense. Most elite fighters have the personality of a ballistic missile. They're insane, unrelenting, and focused on the absolute destruction of whatever they're pointed at. This is known as the toxic champion mindset, and it's pervasive throughout almost all of sports. The toxic champion mindset is the idea that toxic personality traits not only accompany high-level athletic success, but are actually the cause of that success. In this video, we'll talk about what kind of mindset it takes.
I came across a study a while back where they looked at juvenile delinquents, and they looked at the differences with them training MMA, modern martial arts, and let's say traditional martial arts. It turns out that modern martial arts actually made these at-risk young offenders more violent. And to explain the reasoning behind it, they compared MMA to Taekwondo. The main principle being, with a traditional martial art like Taekwondo, you're taught to pause, to wait, to actually have some kind of self-discipline. You're not taught to just attack your opponent and be a brutal super fighter, warrior, hyper-masculine, raw. No, you're taught to actually respect your opponent and to do it for reasons that don't include fighting. So that seems to be the general difference between these dorky martial arts that martial art experts want to rag on. If you ever watch YouTube videos about martial arts, everyone's uploading these stupid videos like, which one would be better in a street fight, bro? Ah, dude, look at this. This couldn't, maim and destroy a person in a real life scenario. That means karate is useless and kung fu is useless and taekwondo is useless because it doesn't work in real life. Wait, so the point of it working in real life is for it to work so good that you kill someone and end up in prison? That's the point between all these genius YouTube gurus that want to teach men how to fight? First of all, I'm pretty sure that anything works in a real life scenario if you know how to do it, meaning don't even do it. Anything, any of these traditional martial arts can teach you how to fight good enough that you don't have to finish the fight, just kind of, defend and run away, which you're supposed to do as a reasonable, responsible adult. But social media has men thinking that you need to be like a war soldier with PTSD in order to be a real man who can handle yourself on the streets. As if. Second of all, I know that this is the sound of beta men talking, no matter how much muscle they have, no matter how shaved their heads are, no matter how many tribal tattoos that are on their body, no matter how much success they've had within the UFC or blah blah blah, because being a real man is not about fighting. So you know how I know it's beta male shit? Because I have Swedish dorky friends that react the same way. Let me tell you how some of my Swedish friends reacted when they found out that I was doing MMA.
Oh, dude, you actually went there?
Yeah?
Oh, dude, you actually did it?
You mean workout? Yeah, no, I tried working out.
Ah, dude, you took punches? And you almost broke your leg and you didn't even feel anything? You have such a pain threshold that's so high?
Yeah, but I'm starting to think it's not a good thing because, I almost could have been really injured and not even noticed. Like, does that sound good to you?
Oh man, you ever been in a real fight?
Yes, I have. And I'll tell you what, it didn't make all the emotional wounds go away. That's the biggest problem with those combat sports that are becoming so modern nowadays. And to tie it back around to the story of the Bosnian serial killer who was a black belt in some so-called pussy sport like karate, like Joe Rogan would say, I can see why martial arts didn't help the guy. Whenever I've become good at boxing or fighting or blah blah blah, let me tell you what happened. I got better at fighting. I got better at taking punches and punching. I also got more confident to the point where I don't even have proper self-distance. If you're walking up to a group of guys being cocky, sure, yeah, you could probably take them. I can probably take them. Maybe not. I mean, how do you know? Doing these martial arts, physically stronger, physically more capable, cockier, and better at handling and dealing out physical pain. It didn't make me any happier. It didn't make me better at emotional self-control. It didn't teach me that much about handling bad energy, whether it's bad thoughts, bad emotions, bad attitudes from, strangers trying to ruin your day, yelling some shit at you down the street. I mean, Swedish people can be extremely rude, but so can Bosnian people. There's rude jackasses in every single country. Are you supposed to fight all of them? I kind of tried a little bit, but I soon realized this isn't that rewarding. Okay, so yeah, I could beat that guy up. I just did. Felt good for about a day or two, but then the situation appears again where someone acts so obnoxious you can't even believe it. And at that point, it's like, well, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to do it again? Because that kind of gets exhausting, doesn't it? I mean, you don't need a lot of experience to see how that could really get exhausting. Are you supposed to handle every conflict like this? This is not making me stronger in any way. This is just making me more aggressive, or making me think that I can handle conflicts with strangers with violence. But at that point, it doesn't even matter what your moron boxing coach or your moron MMA coach says if they're like trying to preach a wholesome message like the best fight is when you don't even get into one. Okay, but you're not really teaching that with, how... this sport you're teaching me is kind of teaching aggressive muscle memory. So that's not good. At that point, it doesn't even matter how good of a guy you are, because ultimately you're gonna just have weird reflexes. And if you're like already struggling with mental issues, if you're already like having some dark thoughts, dark feelings, have a dark identity, then that's even worse. I don't know if I need to mention that the Bosnian serial killer I mentioned used to work as a bouncer. Not only does that job attract a certain kind of person, it also forces that certain kind of person to deal with certain kinds of people. So it's not the kind of people that exactly polish up your view of humanity towards the better. If you ask me, that Bosnian bouncer should have been a gardener, and maybe his karate would have been able to, become part of a holistically healthy lifestyle. But instead, it's the same problem happening for decades. Men don't know how to handle their emotions, Everyone tells them that being vulnerable is being a pussy. You need to be strong and tough and blah, blah, blah. High value man, Andrew Tate cliches just to attract women and keep them. And in the process, they never develop emotional intelligence, emotional immaturity. Freudian slip there. They already have emotional immaturity, but they don't develop emotional maturity. And neither did I. All of those fighting sports didn't teach me anything. In fact, what's really funny is that the same guy who taught me how to box for years is highly respected in the Swedish community where I'm from. Everyone is so impressed by him. I never met a person who didn't have anything negative to say about him, but I always did, because I noticed that the guy was a complete asshole. He was so snappy, so rude, so stern mentally, rigid. I really wasn't surprised when I learned that his youngest son is a Swedish crackhead who's robbed our local Pressbyrån a few times. A Swedish crackhead who is a criminal. Just for the sake of it, I guess. I mean, he doesn't have to be, but with the emotional wounds his dad must have left him with, I can see why that would happen. Even the boxing coach that everyone loves in this city, that everyone thinks is so good and kind and decent, and he always talked about how you shouldn't fight people. He always talked that good talk about how being a real man is avoiding conflict. But at the same time, what was he teaching people? Your words really don't matter as much as your actions. And if your action is teaching men to be aggressive and violent on reflex because it trains their muscle memory, it's probably not going to help. And even when you have a healthy traditional martial art, it might not help if you're not getting, if your life isn't in balance. There's so many things that have to go into it to get good emotional balance. What kind of job do you have? What kind of hobbies do you have? What kind of people do you spend time with? Do any of these things kind of wear you down? Just feed you darkness that you don't know how to handle? If you don't have any other way of conducting therapy other than the physical, there are ways to develop emotional maturity. Maybe the guy should have picked up sewing instead of karate. I don't know. Everyone has their own thing that works for them. But if you want to be healthy, disciplined, and emotionally developed, there's numerous factors that go into it. You can't just tell guys to go do some sport and get your feelings out, get your aggressions out, and things are gonna get better. That's a ridiculous sentiment. What if their problem is that they shouldn't be getting so many emotions out? They shouldn't be developing the habit of getting their emotions out through physical combat. Is that making sense to anyone? Ultimately, social media is full of false prophets that will lead you astray. And the thing about being a false prophet is you're never aware whether or not you actually are one, and you always are one with the best of intentions. That's why you need a bit of self-distance to get away from that ego, get a bit of objective perspective on things, not just look at what always worked for you. Be in tuned and really sensitive when it comes to listening and paying attention to other people. Now, I'm not going to be a false prophet. I'm not going to tell you what to do to develop emotional maturity. You should probably care enough to want to research that stuff on your own, and look at it from a holistic perspective. That is to say, a numerous list of activities, several activities that could be good for you. I'm just going to warn you that simplified answers to complex issues usually aren't good answers, even if they feel good. I had a lot of fun doing boxing and MMA and Muay Thai, but I also kind of quickly noticed why, this is not doing it for me. Fun isn't enough. It can't just be fun. It can't just be. If you want to look at the kind of physical activity that empowers executive functioning areas in the brain that are related to things like emotional self-regulation, self-control, and such, then there's better options than, practicing how to beat people up. I think people need to do their own research and think for themselves. It's too easy to listen to something that sounds like a good take and then think that you're enlightened. I've fallen for that trap so many times. Every person does. You really need to have an internal focus, not an external one, and figure out what's healthy for you. Otherwise, you might end up like that moron War Machine. Now, if you really want an example of how cringy MMA can make you, how self-destructive, how much of a loser MMA can make you, then look up a documentary about that guy and thank me later. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next week.